Good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is. Just evening, I guess. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The birth rates have fallen in the United Kingdom to an unbelievable low. The news is out today, guys. There are areas in the United Kingdom where over 80% of children are now born to foreign-born parents in the United Kingdom. These numbers are catastrophic. They're unsustainable. And look, guys, I'm just gonna try and give you the facts. I'm then going to talk about something I've not spoke about for a while, which I believe is an inevitability: a mass exodus of white culture to Antarctica. Now, as someone who identifies as an Englishman, a white Englishman, I do feel that it's in my bones, it's in my blood to explore. I don't want to sit on a fancy yacht eating lobster thermidor. It's totally gay, guys. It is. It's boring. It really is boring. Drinking expensive whiskey and, fine drinks and, all that stuff to me. Honestly, guys, I genuinely can't think of anything worse. I cannot think of it. To me, my idea of torture is sat on a beach with all this fanciness. That is literally my idea of hell. It really is, guys. I can't think of anything worse. What I feel is in my blood is to be out there exploring, pushing boundaries, going places that nobody's ever been before, finding resources, building civilizations, working together as part of a team, becoming something greater than the sum of your own parts. That's what I feel is in my blood. Not sat on a beach listening to music, dancing away. Yeah, I'll have another lobster thermidor. Oh, Sean, you coming on the yacht? Yeah, all right, I'll come on. Honestly, guys, it's boring. What do you do? Literally, right? You're there on like a luxury yacht. You've got your Bugattis. You've got all these material pleasures, right? All these material things. What do you do with them? There's nothing. What do you do with them? There's nothing to do with them. And some people, I feel, that it is white culture to go and explore, to go and push things and make and build new worlds. And there's a lot of stuff out at the moment. And look, guys, people are, you get these people saying, white people don't have any culture. White people's culture is so ingrained in humanity, you can't see it. White people's culture is building worlds, traveling to, traveling to places, finding resources, building beautiful cities, beautiful architecture. That's white people's culture. Unfortunately, where we are at the moment in the world, there are no more worlds to explore. I do think something very peculiar is happening in the world at the moment, guys. It just seems like that yearning, for me anyway, it seems like that yearning is just becoming stronger and stronger and stronger, literally every day. So, good evening, good afternoon. New figures from the Office of National Statistics, and I've put this link in the description. There's an interactive map if you guys want to go and check on it. New figures have come out from the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, and they've laid bare how rapidly Britain is changing. In 2025, 40%, 40, of all births in England and Wales were to parents who were foreign born. Now, that's parents who were foreign born. I don't know what the statistic is if foreign born parents have a child 20 years ago and then that child has had a child now, because a lot of these people, second, third, fourth generation migrants, maybe not fourth generation, but a lot of certainly first generation, second generation, they still don't speak English. So I'm wondering what the real number is. So 40% of all births in England and Wales, that's close to 250,000 little babies, were born to parents where one or both parents were foreign born. In several areas, particularly in and around London, that figure now exceeds 80%. So think about that. In London, 80% of children born are born to foreign parents. At the same time, the overall birth rate has fallen to a record low, just 4.1 children per woman. That's not a sustainable rate. That is not even a self-replication. This is not just simply a story of diversity. It's a profound demographic shift. UK-born families are having fewer children, while migrant communities are having more children. And people will, you'll get these intellects and they'll come on here and they'll talk about fertility. And I'll tell you what it is, guys. This is it, right? White people want to look after their children, right? They want to look after their children. They want to provide for them. So they're not going to have children if the state has to look after them. So while we're getting taxed and taxed and taxed and taxed, the counter to that argument is true from other communities. Many people watching this will feel what I and millions of other people feel every day, especially if you live in towns and cities across the United Kingdom. Day by day, it feels like you are slowly becoming a minority in your own town, area, village. The shops, schools, the streets, the voices you hear, the accents, the languages being spoken. Everything is changing at a pace previous generations could not even imagine. Now, bear with me, guys, bear with me. Because I've spoke about this. I've spoke about this for a while. I do believe at some point there has to be some sort of mass exodus of, because this is not just happening in the United Kingdom, this is happening all over Europe, all over the West. There has to be some sort of mass exodus of European or a huge cult, There has to be some sort of mass exodus of European culture. It feels increasingly likely that the native populations are being culturally displaced in their own homeland. And I'm one of those people who I could live anywhere. I could. I'm English. I will always be English. I don't need to live on the same street all my life. In fact, I don't, and I couldn't think of anything worse. I've lived in lots of places all over the world, and I've lived in lots of places all over the world, and I don't mind. I can live lots of places, but I understand that that's not the same for a lot of people. A lot of people will be saying, "No, this is where I live," and I get that. Unfortunately, I don't think that the numbers are not in your favor, and that's just sheer maths. Now, without something drastic like a full-scale civil war and something really horrific, I don't think that's gonna change. History shows us that Europeans have always responded to pressures by seeking new frontiers, whether it's the Vikings, the explorers of the Age of Discovery, whether it's the settlers of America, Australia, New Zealand, parts of Africa. Europeans, guys, and you should be proud of this. You should absolutely be proud of this because it's in your blood. Europeans have an unmatched record of finding new lands and building new civilizations from nothing. No other culture even comes close in terms of scale, innovation, and endurance. Think about it. There are places in Africa, they still live in mud huts. They literally still live in mud huts. If current trends continue, and I don't see why they wouldn't, barring a catastrophic, and I mean a catastrophic breakdown, meltdown, and the fabric of society that would be gone. one day that restlessness, that pioneering spirit, I believe, will once again look for somewhere new because it will have to. Perhaps even somewhere as extreme and untouched as Antarctica, to preserve a way of life that feels under threat here at home. Now, these are uncomfortable truths, but the numbers don't lie. And like I said, I put a link in the description. These are uncomfortable truths, but they are truths nonetheless. Britain has always been shaped, we've had waves of migration before, but the speed and scale of what we are seeing now is unprecedented in, I want to say in living memory, but I think it's unprecedented in history and non-recorded history. The question I think everybody needs to face if you live in the United Kingdom and the West right now is whether we can maintain social cohesion, shared identity, and a sense of community along these fractured demographic foundations that are shifting so dramatically. Lower birth rates among native population, record immigration, and rapid cultural changes are not abstract statistics, guys. They affect how people feel, how communities collaborate, how schools function, how towns look and sound, and what kind of country we are going to leave for our future generations. Somebody was questioning, what was his name? David Lammy, right? And I know this is like, David Lammy is like the walking gaff. And somebody was saying to him, David Lammy, this is not what our grandfathers fought for. And David Lammy, with his intellectual response, said, actually, I don't think his grandfather fought in the Second World War. The way he said is, our great-grandfathers, our grandparents fought to give us the choice. And as a veteran, right, somebody who's seen more blood in more mud, and my friends who've not come back, I'm 100% confident nobody goes and makes the ultimate, nobody goes and pays the ultimate toll so their kids can give away their inheritance. Let's put this onto the micro. Put this onto the micro. Imagine, I hope they don't, but I guess at some point, if you put this onto the micro, imagine your mum and dad, right? Your mum and dad pass away or whatever, and they leave you an inheritance, right? And you give away that inheritance. You just give it away. You just say, here. You give it away to someone. You go to another country and you just give it to people on the street. How do you think your mum and dad would feel? And I don't know how we've got here, guys. I don't know how we've got here, but this conversation, I think people need to start having this conversation openly and honestly, without hysteria, but without denial as well, because ignoring these trends won't make them go away. They won't. It's, ignoring what's happening right now in the United Kingdom is not going to make it go away. I see the only exit strategy is Antarctica. Personally, I don't think that's a bad idea, and I'm all for it. I am, but that's because, exploration. I feel like that's what I should be doing. I can't think of the word. It's, how do you describe that? How do you describe that 40% of all births in England and Wales are from foreign-born parents? I would like to know the other 60%. How many of those are born from first or second generation migrants? I don't think that's in the, I'm not sure if that's in the, I'm not sure if that's in the Office for National Statistics. Towns and cities are changing at an alarming rate, guys. Nobody can deny that. Absolutely nobody. If you try and deny that, you're You're just denying. You're in absolute denial. Yes, there's going to be strongholds, but ultimately, I feel the only exit strategy that people have right now, because this is happening all over the world, the only exit strategy really is a mass exodus to Antarctica. Right, listen, ladies and gentlemen, this was just a relatively short live stream. I am going to be back on at what time? I am going to be back on at 8 o'clock on my usual spot. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, the birth rates are out. The Office of National Statistics are claiming that there are areas in the United Kingdom where 80% of children are born to foreign parents. In fact, let me just share this real quick so I don't get into trouble. And I've put this link in the description.